My name is Paul Vallas, and I'm running for mayor. I'm the grandson of Greek-American immigrants who settled in the Roseland community um, right before World War I. And there are 6 veterans in my family, including myself and my sons and my brother and my father. There are 4 police officers, now 3, because one of my police officer's sons became a firefighter. And there are 2 firefighters and 3 teachers. Plus, we found time to open, by the time we were done, 3 restaurants. We like to say that my dad wanted to spend more time with the family, so he opened the restaurant. So we worked 7 days a week. We would, on Sunday, we would go to church to light a candle, and then we would all go to work because Sundays are the big days. So, my mother always says, "Did you light a candle on your way to work?" It's the tradition. So, it's really the American dream come true, but it's a family of public servants. And in my entire career, I've never thought of doing anything but public service. My time, 13 years in the National Guard and working for the state legislature, and then, of course, being brought back to Chicago to be Mayor Daley's budget director and then school chief, the schools of which I turned around, and then later on, rescuing the Philadelphia schools when they were in crisis and when the state took over, and then going to New Orleans to rebuild the schools after Hurricane Katrina, and then, of course, doing international work. I've done international work in Haiti and in Chile after the devastating earthquakes, and I've done work for the Obama administration in the Department of the Interior on revamping education on the Indian reservations, and then later for the Justice Department on revamping programs designed to provide occupational training for offenders, for individuals who have been incarcerated, and then having strategies to transition them back into the communities when they're released, returning citizens, as they're referred to. So it's been a life of public service, and I'm running for mayor right now because the city is in a leadership crisis. All the problems that the city is facing, from the problems of a degraded, demoralized police department to a school system that people are fleeing in record numbers, to annual budgets that seem to constantly increase our property taxes, fees, and fines. All those problems are a product of bad decisions on the 5th floor, bad decisions coming out of the mayor's office. They didn't begin with Lori Lightfoot, but I think she's made things significantly worse. And what I'm offering is good leadership. What I'm offering is a mayor who's going to make the right decisions, who's going to reverse many of the bad decisions that have been made by this mayor and her predecessors. And what I'm offering is a mayor who knows how to recruit people from within the community who can be put in leadership positions to get the city back on track. When I become mayor, I know who to promote into leadership positions in the police department from the community, from within the police department, who know what effective policing is. I'll know who to bring into the schools to get the schools back on track. I'll know who to bring into city agencies. So whether it's streets and sanitation or transportation, or whether it's the buildings department or the planning departments, which are supposed to be business friendly but are not, I will know who to bring in so we can make the city that had the reputation as the city that works, to make the city that works again. So that's my pledge, and that's why I'm running. And thanks again for the opportunity to make an introduction and provide a little background. And now would love to hear your questions.
So you often spoke about proactive policing. So what do you mean by that? Do you mean stop and frisk or something else? What that entails?
Oh, no, Chicago has never had stop and frisk. And I'm not talking about stop and frisk or mass incarceration. I'm talking about having police arrest people when they are breaking the law, and when they're violating the public way, when they're destroying public and private property, when they're just walking into stores and stealing, when they're assaulting people on the street, when they're stealing cars. I mean, the arrest rates for car thefts are like 2.5%. The arrest rates for shootings are 5%. They're not even arresting people who are coming in and stealing if they're stealing less than $1,000. And of course, the state's attorney is not prosecuting them. So when I talk about proactive policing, I'm talking about having police arrest people who are violating the law, who are committing serious crimes. And and letting the police know that if they are proactive and responsive, that they're going to be supported. Right now, I think they're totally intimidated. And if you ask any police officer, if your listeners go out and ask any police officer on the street, I think 9 out of 10 will tell them that they're reluctant to chase, they're reluctant to pursue a criminal because they're afraid they'll be reprimanded.
And also, do you think that maybe part of that story is, as you mentioned, like $1,000, that we can basically say that it's okay to go into shop and steal maybe $500, $600 of goods? And so, what do you think about that policy? What would you change in it? Would you leave again the level of $1,000, or would you actually go for the decrease in?
Well, let me point out that the city is a home rule unit, meaning in the state constitution, Chicago as a home rule unit can enact its own laws. So Chicago could enact its own public safety ordinance to increase penalties, to demand penalties. In fact, Chicago could enact an ordinance that also involves charging people and sentencing people to prison for like up to 364 days. So Alderman Napolitano actually introduced a ordinance called a nuisance ordinance, and that ordinance increased penalties and fines for individuals who did the things that I was referring to: stealing, destroying public and private property, violating the public way. So what I would do is I would first of all push the police to enforce the laws, to make arrests, but I would also, if need be, enact tougher laws, to, enact greater penalties. And I would be prepared to bypass the state's attorney, because the law department can also go to the courts to bring charges against someone. The city law department can also litigate. The city law department can act as a prosecutor's office. So if Fox is unwilling to charge someone for committing a serious crime, like attacking a police officer, intimidating witnesses, destroying public and private property, the city itself could prosecute. So we'll be prepared to enforce the laws, and in some cases, we'll be prepared to bypass the state's attorney if there be a need.
So you also spoke about the case review units, and how do you think that would actually improve the situation?
Well, the objective here is to create within the law department a litigation unit, and what that litigation unit would do is the following. It would work to forge a relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because the U.S. Attorney's Office has powers independent of the state. The U.S. Attorney can charge. Federal charges are much tougher. The federal government can deny someone bail. Even if the state waives bail, a state law requires a waiving of bail. Sentencing under federal law is much tougher, particularly people who are prior felons who commit crimes with guns. There's mandatory sentencing. So I would forge a relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office so we can prosecute more cases under the U.S. Attorney's Office. Also, this litigation division would have the ability to go directly to a judge to have someone charged if the state's attorney refuses to charge. And this litigation division could also try cases in cases where the state's attorney refuses to try cases. What this litigation division could also do is review cases. This is the case review unit, so to speak. So they would make public when the state's attorney is not charging someone who's maybe been arrested for 6 or 7 prior felonies. I mean, so many violent crimes are being committed by individuals out on felony bail or in the early release program, who have actually been arrested for multiple times and charged with past felonies, and yet they're on the street. It's like no one's examining their long criminal record. So the case review unit could point out when the state's attorney is not charging, when judges are not are not sentencing appropriately. They could simply provide transparency, and everybody, whether they pretend to or not. People respond to public pressure. So sometimes transparency is public pressure, letting the public know what the judges and what the state's attorney are doing or not doing, or for that, and bypassing the state's attorney draws public attention. Going to the federal government to prosecute where the state's attorney has failed to prosecute draws public attention. That's a way to basically apply public attention to the state's attorney and to the judiciary so that they are more responsive.
And you talked about increasing safety on the CTA by actually getting more police officers on the train and employing more police officers. So and paying that by using the money which is at the moment used for private security.
Yeah,
So
right.
so considering that those contracts are I think for the next 3 years. So how do you think? How do you plan to do that? Because the city has definitely obligation for next 3 years to pay private security.
Well, look, I haven't immersed myself in the details of the contract. I just want to point out, though, right now, a survey that was done said that almost 50% of all CTA riders considered the CTA to be unsafe. And as a result of that, I think in large part, ridership is down 500,000 riders a day. And right now, the money generated through the fare box constitutes 18% of the CTA's operating budget. What that means is that when the COVID money runs out, the CTA is going to go bankrupt, and we're not going to have a public transit system because there is going to be no money to operate the trains. That's a fact. So while people will say, well, it's service, while people will say that it's the maintenance problems or the fact that the trains are dirty, all those problems stem from the fact that the CTA cannot keep its employees because they're leaving in large part because of public safety, and they can't recruit their employees in large part because of public safety. So they have neither the staff nor the riders to sustain the system. So until you reestablish public safety and the CTA, you basically have a system that's on the verge of financial collapse. So whether it takes me a couple, first of all, I am going to deploy an additional 300 police officers to the CTA on top of the officers who are already designated. You need at least 500 police officers patrolling the CTA on the platforms, on the stations, riding the trains. It's the only way you're going to give people a comfort level. And, if I can't immediately pay for those officers by eliminating the current privatized contracts, or if I have to wait to phase out those contracts, the bottom line is going to get done because the private security, people have no confidence in the private security. Yes, they have the dogs and the muzzled dogs, and that might be helping on the turnstile. But the bottom line is you talk to the drivers and you talk to the riders, people are getting accosted, people are being assaulted on the CTA. The private security cannot make arrests. They're not trained to make arrests. They do not pursue. And very often they basically look the other way when there's an assault going on.
Regarding police officers, so do you plan to have police officers that are uniformed, or you plan to have a mix of those who are basically in civilian clothes that wouldn't be? So if you can.
Yeah, very good question. Well, my goal would be to have on the main stations 2 officers stationed or a car from the local police district, and they have officers walking the beat. My plan would also be to have officers, both uniform and not uniform, kind of riding the train. Now, it's impossible to ride all the trains all the time, but there's no reason why officers can't select and certain trains to ride. I would also give all law enforcement officials free passes to ride the CTA for free. The idea here would be to have a law enforcement, whether it's CTA, whether it's a county sheriff's police, whether it's state police, or whether it's security, to basically, so people when they ride, the police will know that the law enforcement community rides for free. And so that there's a constant, even if you don't see them in uniform, you don't know whether or not somebody on that train indeed is a law enforcement official. And I think all those things would help improve security.
And I think one of those subjects that it's very dear to you is school choice. So how do you plan to get support for something like that? Because a lot of people that I spoke with about school choice, generally their first comment is, oh, well, I'm paying higher rent, higher price for my home, higher taxes, so that my kid can go to this a better school. And if, like someone comes along, school choice, you can get busing of kids and etc., then the quality of education that my kids get and that I pay will go down. So how do you plan to implement that, and how would you actually explain to the parents that are concerned that the education of their kids will be actually worse off if you implement school choice?
Well, first of all, the money follows the children. So the money follows the children, whether they go to public regular public schools or public not-for-profit charter schools, because charter schools are public schools too. Okay, so the money is always going to follow the children. If you have less children, you have less money. If you have more children, you have more money. What I'm basically saying is parents need choices regardless. I mean, what if their school is chronically failing and unsafe and they're simply dissatisfied with the quality of their school? Why should they be confined to that school? They can't get into a magnet school, so they're stuck with their failing school or their school is unsafe. There are many poor parents who send their kids to parochial and private school. I support the scholarship program, which Governor Pritzker supports. He not only supports the program, but he supports an expansion to that program. So if you have like low-income families or poor families sending their kids to parochial and private schools, why can't they receive some financial support? I mean, did you know that most city employees do not send their kids to Chicago Public Schools? Do you know that Forbes magazine, and it's a bit dated, but a while back they did the study, the only study I've ever seen, that basically said 40% of the teachers who send their kids, who have school-age children in the Chicago Chicago teachers do not send their kids to Chicago Public Schools. In fact, it's interesting when you look at some of the union leadership, they all seem to have their kids in magnet schools. So at the end of the day, you know, why should poor parents and poor families be denied educational choice? And at the end, you know, 90% of the children will and always will attend parochial and private schools. But the point that I want to make is the district's capped charter schools the last 10 years, and yet it's lost enrollment, I think, in each of the last 10 years. It's lost close to, I don't know, something like 80,000, 90,000 students. So people are leaving the system because of the lack of quality school choices.
And regarding quality, so when we compare the US and Chicago to OECD countries, other developed countries, even some that are not developed, then we see actually that education that the kids in the US get, it's well below standard. And also, for instance, in most European, well, in all European countries, it's normal that kids in the middle school have STEM, that they would have coding, that they would have physics, chemistry, and other subjects. And it's practically non-existent in Chicago public schools.
Also vocational ed and work study. Yeah. It's not, you go to Germany and, you know, you have extensive work study tracks.
So do you actually plan to reform CPS in a way that actually kids are being taught more and more subjects, or to improve the things like apart from school choice, the things that kids are learning, to expand some that?
You know, absolutely. But let me tell you quickly how you could fill these empty buildings that currently exist, and then I want to talk about the other things I'll do for the schools. There are 56,000 children attending public charter schools, public not-for-profit charter schools throughout the city in communities. 96% of those children are Black and Latino. Over 90% are poor. For those children, that's the only alternative to their failing school. Because of the teachers union, the school district will not allow them to use empty buildings. So on the west side, you have Manly High School, has 67 students and 25 faculty, in a high school that has a capacity of like 1,200. A high school that I renovated for $10 million is a historic high school. And yet, what, a mile, 2 miles away, there's a charter high school that enrolls 400 kids in a warehouse. I mean, why can't those public school kids use that public school building, and then kids from the neighborhood can go to that school? So if you wanted to fill those buildings quickly, those empty buildings, literally overnight, you can invite, the community could invite the public not-for-profit charter schools to move their schools into those buildings, and those buildings would not only be freed up, but the charter schools would be paying rent, which would be providing millions of dollars in more money to the school district. The fact that a huge number of minority children who attend public charter schools cannot use publicly owned buildings, I think, is a violation of their civil rights.
Do you think that the key issue with CPS, that it's actually underfunded, or is it something else? And how would you comment, like, the size of the budget?
Well, CPS is spending $30,000 a child. So that doesn't sound like being underfunded. Also, CPS consumes 60% of all the property taxes paid in Chicago go to CPS. But all that money going to the schools, only about 60% of the money actually finds its way into the classroom. Why? Because of the central office bureaucracy. Why? Because of the central office managed and administered programs. Why? Because of these massive privatization contracts that the city enters into that are for food service, for school maintenance, that incidentally has left the schools dirty and has left the food very, very unattractive to the students. So clearly, my approach would be to push the money down to the local school level so the principals have more money and more discretion on how to use the money. If you do that, you can bring more resources. You can spend more on instruction. You can hire more teachers. You can offer more programs. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do would be to open the schools to the community. Schools should be community schools. There's over 640 schools. 125 campus parks. Is what, 130 or maybe more high school campuses, both, public school campuses. I mean, with swimming pools, with auditoriums, with state-of-the-art tracks and field. Why can't those community schools be open to the community so you can have park district programs, faith-based, community-based organizations? A lot of them have programs for the kids, but they don't have facilities for the kids. So I would do that too. And I would also create what's known as work study. So I would have every single city department, the agency, the unions that the city negotiates with and has contracts with, companies that are subsidized by the schools. The mayor controls $28 billion in spending and 100,000 jobs. The mayor controls the CHA, the CTA, police, fire, the airports, water, sewer. She controls the schools. At the end of the day, I would create thousands of work-study jobs so the high school kids can actually participate in paid work-study and paid work-study internships while they're going to schools. So it will be a way of getting young people in vocational, technical, and occupational training programs that are actually run and managed and administered by the businesses and by the unions who will ultimately hire them.
Regarding, unfortunately, we have too many Ukrainians now that came to our city because of, we all know why. Do we have actually any plans to help out to those communities, how to integrate better into Chicago and generally also with the other people coming from Eastern Europe and other parts of the world?
Well, when I ran the schools, every single school district I have run has gone through periods when there was a spike in immigration for a variety of reasons. I remember, for example, if you remember the war in the Balkans in the 90s, where we had a huge influx of individuals. Of course, when they exited Afghanistan, there were thousands of Afghani families that came to the United States. Hundreds and hundreds of families came to Chicago. I remember in Philadelphia, we had an influx of immigrants. And when I was rebuilding schools in New Orleans, rebuilding the district after the destruction from Hurricane Katrina, I rebuilt the entire school system in New Orleans. We had an influx of Haitian immigrants after the devastating earthquake in Haiti. I actually went and I worked on and off for a period of 5 to 6 years doing rebuilding in Haiti. So we've always been able to accommodate the influx of immigrants. And let me tell you how we did it. We did it by basically, making all 77 communities in Chicago welcoming communities. So when families came to our schools, we didn't check their immigration status. We enrolled them in school. If families needed housing, we would connect them with the Department of Housing or the CHA. The CHA has thousands of unoccupied units that are unoccupied. What we also did was we connect them with immigration and naturalization. So what we did was we simply, we didn't designate 4 or 5 or 6 communities, and we would house them in renovated schools that had been shut down and things like that. What we did was we basically allowed those individuals to be spread out among multiple communities because, for example, there are communities that would welcome immigrants from Venezuela and elsewhere who are coming to the United States. And so our newcomer programs allowed like children who had English language deficiencies to participate in the extended day program. So we were able to accelerate. We were able to basically transition them. And our approach to bilingual education was we did transitional bilingual. You know what I mean? So our approach was to help the kids transition to English as quickly as possible. And we did it through our extended day program. So students would end the school day and then they would spend an hour if they had academic deficiencies in math or language arts, we would spend that additional hour of instruction focusing on that. If they had English language deficiency issues, they would spend that additional hour in the after-school extended day programs focusing on that. You see what I mean? So by opening our campuses to extended day programs, we're able to target the programs to meet the needs of the students. And that's why, I mean, you know, I had one school on the north side, 26 different languages were spoken at that school. We also did something else. We created an international teacher recruitment program. So we recruited hundreds of teachers internationally, and we were able, at the time through Senator Dick Durbin and others, we were able to secure 6-year work visas for teachers from other countries. So we recruited teachers from Serbia, we recruited teachers from Palestine. Well, I remember we recruited 50 math teachers from Austria. You know what I mean? We recruited teachers from Spain. We always remarked how handsome the teachers from Spain were. And of course, I explained that's because Greece colonized Spain and that they were really of Greek descent. I'm joking, or half joking. But the point is, we literally had teachers with 20-year work visas. And of course, so we were able to not only expand our pool of teachers, available teachers, but we were really able to diversify our teacher population. We had teachers from Nigeria, from Ghana, you know, individuals who came in. So we were able to really diversify our teacher force and like never before. And 6-year work visas are like gold. To come to the United States and have a 6-year work visa. And those are the type of programs that I would restore at the Chicago
Yeah,
Public
and
Schools
definitely
now.
the salaries that CPS teachers get
Yes.
are competitive to practically any European country, actually. So, how do you respond to comments questioning your long Democrat credentials?
Well, I am a lifelong Democrat. I mean, I went to work for Democrats. You know, I went to work for Democrats back in Springfield. I worked for Phil Rock, who was the Democratic president of the Senate. And of course, Dawn Clark Netsch, who was probably the most progressive state senator. I worked for her directly for about 12 straight years. And then, of course, if you remember, I ran against one of your brethren. I ran against Rob Blagojevich in the Democratic primary for mayor, only lost by 1.5 percentage points. And then later went on to be selected or be invited to run as his lieutenant governor when Pat Quinn ran. And of course, I ran as a Democrat. So I've always been a Democrat, you know. And look,
they would say because of some endorsements that you got and some the policies that you want to implement, they are more Republican than the Democrats. So it's not questioning what you did through your life; it's just the policies and the endorsements that you got.
Well, you know, public safety is a human right. If I shudder to think that the Democrats don't support public safety, ensuring that every community is safe and secure. I don't think that's a Democrat or a Republican issue. Financial accountability, you know, holding the line on property taxes, I would hope, you know, so that the city can remain affordable. People won't be driven out of their homes because of gentrification. I would hope that that's not just a Republican issue, that's a Republican and Democratic issue. And finally, quality schools. Quality public school choices. You know, the biggest advocates for charter schools were the Clinton administration and then the Obama administration. Arne Duncan, who actually opened 100 charter schools in Chicago after my departure, became President Barack Obama's education secretary. And then he pushed public school choice across the country. So I don't think these are, you know, I think what they're trying to do in an overwhelmingly Democratic city is they're trying to divert attention from the issues. They don't want to talk about my solutions to address the public safety issue. They don't want to talk about my strategy for improving the schools, for taking on the teachers union so we can get our schools back. You know, the community can be empowered to determine what they want in their schools. So I think a lot of the so-called, well, he's a Republican, is designed to distract people from the real issues, because they don't want to challenge me on the issues I'm raising or the solutions I'm offering.
And so, Gloria Lightfoot, she commented, well, basically two things. Like the first, that if one would not want to vote for her in South Side, they're better off staying at home. And the other thing that was actually more interesting to me, because she basically said that this race is between you and her. So it's kind of like interesting way of almost endorsing you in a way. So how do you respond to the comment that people should just not vote if they do not vote for her? And how do you comment also that she is thinking that this race is between you and the mayor?
Well, I think right now her biggest challenge is well, first of all, if she has such great confidence that she's going to be running against me, I guess her polls must be telling her what our polls are telling us, and that means I'm the front runner. But I think a bigger issue for now is she going to get into the runoff? Because, as you know, I've seen polls where she's neck and neck with Brandon Johnson. But look, for me, people in this country died for the right to vote. They sacrificed for the right to vote. So when you tell people, if you're not going to vote for me, you should not vote at all, I think that's just irresponsible and divisive. And let her dig herself out of that hole. I don't care who I'm running against. I'm in a race. I see the finish line. I'm afraid if I look to the left of me or look to the right of me, I'm going to lose seconds. You never do that in a race, particularly in a sprint. And hopefully that first tape will be the only tape. But if I'm in a runoff, well, it's 4 weeks until the second tape. So I'm going to continue to focus on my issues, the issues I've been talking about for well over 3 to 4 years, by the way, even long before I started thinking about running. And I'm going to keep my eye on the finish line, and I'm not going to be detracted by who's running against me or what they're saying about me, because people want a safe city, people want an affordable city, and people want quality schools. And I have a track record in having had success in bringing all three of those things to the community, both here in Chicago and elsewhere. And if people are looking for the leadership that can make the entire city safe, that can improve the quality of schools in every community, and can make the city affordable again, then basically I'm their candidate.